Hello. Today we're going to just talk about Kami and how to use Kami. While my version of Kami is more of the teacher version, I also am going to talk about how we can use it, but mostly some of the features that are really on here for our students to use. So as you can see, here is a PDF of a story that I use in one of my classes. This is an assignment for them. So their version looks very much similar to this. The PDF looks exactly the same. And on this left-hand side in this bar, there's really a lot of options for us and our students to utilize to make this PDF a little bit more interactive than our normal worksheets would be. First things first is you can select, and you can use a hand tool, select annotations. So if these already had annotations, a great way to, select certain pieces to use or to point out, especially if you're working on a smartboard, would be to use that. One of my favorite tools for my students is this dictionary option. So if they don't know a word in the book or the story, I can highlight it, and then I hit dictionary. Oh, is it gonna work? And now they can get the what it means. They can finally define words that they don't know. And this is really great. It saves a lot of time that for them, instead of going on Google and things, they can just easily use Kami to figure out the definitions of words. This is also great for not just an English class, but any of the classes that are where students are reading different types of literature, for them to just get a quick idea of what something might mean, especially when we're asking them to read texts that are a little bit more challenging. Additionally, we have an option for text speech, and this is great for our students. Any student in general, this is wonderful for, but I especially think of our students who do have IEPs and do need certain accommodations and modifications where verbal responses are needed. And so our kids who really prefer those things can easily respond to a question. If I had one posted here, verbally, and it would type their response in for them. So that's a great option for our students. And it's something that I try to push with my students when they are filling out things on worksheets using Kami. Additionally, there's an option for marking up text. I absolutely love this option as a teacher. I like using it when I grade on Kami. It just makes it really easy to point out certain things to my students, to kind of cross things out if things are incorrect, and to really highlight things that I think are important when I'm giving back some feedback. So in this markup text option, you have a text highlighter, so you could literally click on it and then highlight the text that you want to point out. So maybe, with this particular assignment, I would have students looking at certain pieces of text. So maybe I would highlight certain pieces for one, student A would be reading green, and then student B, maybe I have them reading pink, and then maybe they're going to kind of discuss it. What they've read to kind of shorten how much reading they're getting, things of that nature. So that's really great. It's also great if a student misses a question where you can just highlight a question and say, go back in and fix this. We also have box highlighter, so this makes it really easy too if we're trying to get students to just read certain sections of a text, or we're just trying to point out a certain section on a quiz or anything of that nature, where you could just box highlight the entire piece that you are trying to really get them to focus on. There's the strike through. So I like using strike through when, especially when I'm grading something, where I can kind of just strike through the question if it's incorrect. And again, you just highlight the text, click on it, highlight the text, and it'll strike through. I can also see this being used if you have certain students where you don't want them to look at certain texts and you're saying, avoid this. This is something we're not going to look at. We're looking at something else. You could just cross through the text that you don't want them to look at. And also there's underlining, which again is great. It's great for pointing things out for students. For here in the Raven particularly, we have, certain words and phrases are repeated over and over again. So that's something I might want to do for some of my students, is underline things that are being repetitive to help them start to analyze that. Additionally, there's a bunch of colors you can use for highlighting and things, which is awesome for assigning students maybe a certain color. So maybe you're working on the same doc, or something of that nature where you can assign a certain color, or if you're having them look for certain content. So for me, I might assign, symbolism as one color, alliteration maybe is a color, things that are characterization or text evidence, like any kind of content or a concept that I want them to really be focusing on. And maybe they have to focus on 2 or 3 different things. So highlighting in different colors helps kind of me decide if they're hitting the right points, but also helps them visually. Additionally, there is a more color option, so they could choose other colors to kind of go with it. So you're not really that limited in terms of colors, but I do think that the color palette on Kami is definitely not as, there's not as many choices as there is in Google Docs and Google Slides. There's also a comment option. So this is very much like Google Docs, but I actually think this is a little bit better than Google Docs in terms of comments. So it gives me the option to look just like Google Docs. So I'm just gonna put Google Docs here because that's what I was thinking. And then I can leave the comment, but it's also got an option for voice comments. So sometimes it's easier to look at student work and just verbally give them some feedback. So using Kami, you get that option. There's also video comment feedback. So that's also another great option to kind of, build that connection with students and to kind of do something else. And lastly, in this option section, it's got screen capture. So this is great if you're trying to share student work and you only want to share little bits and pieces. You can kind of capture the screen and work with that only. And again, we have the color wheel. We have text boxes. So this is exactly the same for our students. They have this T and they have a text box. This lets you change the font size and the font color. And all they do is click on T for text box. And as you can see, I had done it here. They click anywhere on the screen and they type here. The cool thing about this is we can expand it, minimize it to kind of just like we would on Google Classroom or Google Docs. But the other thing I like is that we can move these texts around. I love that, having that option, because that makes your worksheets and your PDFs a little bit more interactive for students. And also at the top, you can see I can change my font size, my font. I can make things bold. I can, color the background. I can do bullets. So I have all those options that I would have on Google Docs. But the best part is, again, you can move the text. So it's great if you want to make something interactive, or you want students, or maybe they're doing matching and you want them to kind of move the text around and say they didn't do something correctly, you want them to move it. It's just a little bit easier for them to move their text around. If you teach things like math, they do give you equation symbols. So you can also add these equation symbols in, which is really just a great option. We have a drawing feature. I love to use the drawing feature with my students. I specifically use it with sketch notes and things of that nature, where my students can go in. I could put a PDF of just like a notebook page or just a plain blank sheet of paper, and students can pick their color options and they can start to draw right directly onto their screen. I do know students tend to get upset about drawing when it comes to a computer mouse or the little pad on the Chromebooks. But if students do have the option for like those pens and things, that also makes it a little bit easier. One thing I also say to kind of combat that, if they are using sketch notes, is that there is an option down below for shapes. So they can get certain shapes, certain lines, and they can create through that as well onto their text. Again, there's eraser. We all make mistakes when we're doing things. Students can easily pick the eraser, so can we, and just erase everything that they have been doing. And it gives you the option to erase all annotations or just things like drawings. So they don't always have to erase everything in the book, in the area. We can add media to our PDFs, so that's kind of cool as well, because you can add things like YouTube videos, stickers. So if you're, grading and you're giving feedback and you want to give them a sticker of sorts, you can absolutely add stickers, which is kind of nice. And then they can sign it as a signature. For students on the student end, at the top right-hand corner, there's usually a submit button of some sort. But we have, like, again, a save button, a download button, open file. Here, obviously, the sizing of our pages. So if we want to zoom in, zoom out. So for students or staff who struggle maybe to read, they didn't bring their glasses that day, or it's just easier to look at one little spot when we're trying to break down reading for students, and maybe we don't want them to get overwhelmed and we want them to go paragraph by paragraph. You can zoom in and out to do those things. And that's basically the brief run through of how to use Kami on the teacher side and kind of what it would look like for your students as well.